and welcome to today's webinar on NIS2 compliance and IoT resilience. My name is Stephen Dane. I'm the Vice President of Global Channel Sales here at Aeris. And I'm joined by a fine panel of experts to discuss this important topic. And we're going to hit on key points, such as what NIS2 means to organizations in Europe, how to manage risk when managing IoT devices, and fundamentally, why act now? So let me introduce our panel. First, I'd like to go to Peter.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Peter. I'm heading the International IoT Competence Center at Orange Belgium.
And Joel.
Sure. Hi, I'm Joel Stradling, Senior Research Director at IDC. I'm responsible for our European security and privacy research practice.
And last but not least, Paul.
Hello, I'm Paul Healy, Vice President of Security Sales at Aeris, based in London.
Thank you very much for joining. We're going to have a great discussion, I know. But before we dig into that, I'd like to start with getting a customer view in terms of what customers are feeling right now and what are they experiencing right now when it comes to compliance. So my first question goes to Peter. What are your customers feeling right now in terms of this, responding to NIS2?
Well, yeah, actually, many of the IoT devices they are using today, they have weak to very weak security features, and as such are vulnerable to different kinds of attacks, unauthorized access, or they're even compromised to launch DDoS attacks. In the past months, we've seen our smart parking partner who was a victim of a brute force attack. So one of their routers that are behind a parking camera got hacked on its public IP address. The user login and password, they were probably too weak, but because we could see that from the router, hackers, they launched quite some BitTorrent traffic. Now, this was initially not visible. It continued unnoticed for a couple of months. While our customer's invoice slightly increased month by month. And so at the end, of course, he got alerted, he alerted us, but then, crime was already ongoing for a couple of months. Now, this is just one case. We see this happening in different business segments and even the critical ones.
I think it's certainly backed up by the research that we are seeing also. In terms of the number of attacks that are taking place on IoT devices. And that's one of the reasons that we really want to focus on this. Compliance is one thing, but the real world in terms of attack surface growing for IoT devices has been a real concern to more and more organizations. So then the next question really goes back to our research expert, Joel. What are those threats, do you think, in terms of attacks on IoT devices, and how are adversaries looking to compromise IoT networks?
Well, the first point I'd like to make, Stephen, is that the adversaries don't behave by any rules or regulations. They look for the weakest link in the chain. And unfortunately, the cyber criminal ecosystem is well aware that IoT endpoints can be easy to crack or hack into. And once they have been compromised, they can exist in that state for a long time before the organization even knows that's happened. I think that expression, hackers don't hack, they log in, is one factor. And so that takes us to the point of passwords that can be very, very weak on IoT endpoints, although there are regulations to strengthen that. But, for example, going with the generic admin 123 isn't really a good idea. So credential stuffing or brute force hacking is done to compromise generic passwords. Another common attack might include code executions on unpatched firmware. So unpatched firmware is also a weakness. And this turns the IoT endpoint then effectively into a botnet to run those DDoS attacks that Peter was just mentioning. So in each of these cases, the consequences are quite grim for the victims of those compromises.
Yes, I mean, there is a growing level of awareness of those risks. But it does seem that we are still in the early stages of awareness from the market and the customer. Would that be correct?
Yes, I think so. A lot more work needs to be done to have that level of maturity for secure by design in IoT endpoints, for example. It's quite a traditional set of security challenges. You have people, processes and technologies. So it's not just about having security technology in place, but it's also organizational. So, the stakeholders within a business need to be identified and be on board and accountable for any of the issues. And then with that holistic IoT security concept, you need to have, the rest of the organization, not just the security team, on board with any type of IT transformation to make sure that it's a team sport. And then the final point is improving visibility to get help to monitor the health of the network. So it's no longer a case of security being an afterthought. Secure by design is a far better way to approach the security problem with modern IoT networks.
Yes, yeah. And then, Peter, when you look across broadly, across your customer base, is that in line with what you're seeing in terms of that growing level of awareness?
Yes, definitely. So we see that enterprises are using more and more IoT devices, cellular IoT devices, even in their digital transformation projects. But very often they're just unaware that buying off-the-shelf sensors, cameras, routers include, in fact, not sufficiently in-depth security measures. And these devices then get connected to a public cellular network, making them very vulnerable to cyber attacks. Now we see a very strong take-up in cellular IoT devices in all kinds of segments, including the very critical ones, such as the energy grids, the transport and logistics, financial payments, but also in critical industries. And of course, by design, cellular connectivity is very secure from the SIM card up to the application server at customer side. But the customers are very poorly aware that the danger lies really in the end device they are using, hardware and software. A problem we also see is that customers don't always automatically turn to Orange for providing a security solution, although we are, besides a worldwide connectivity provider, also an ICT integrator. And then a third issue is that, we come in contact with the IoT fleet managers. We're selling IoT connectivity, but these are not necessarily the people that are responsible for cybersecurity. So it takes us quite some effort to get through the CICSO. So they're really the security responsibles in those companies.
Yes, and so I think it's a growing level of awareness within a broad set of customers, but there are challenges in terms of ensuring that these customers are placing enough focus on ensuring security and visibility for those devices. So therefore, the NIS2 directive is important. Joel, what do we need to know about NIS2 and the compliance requirements and who the stakeholders are in terms of responding to this directive?
Well, the first thing I would mention is that NIS2, which is a good thing, has driven security stakes higher within an organization. So you have, for example, executive level accountability. For the most part, since security teams are following some types of frameworks, most of the components of NIS2 would be present in there. And then just referring very specifically to two parts of the NIS2 Charter in Chapter 4, there are two very foundational measures that must be looked at and organizations have to undertake. And the first one is comprehensive risk assessments. So those are, putting in place those policies around risk analysis and information security. And then the other part is asset discovery and classification. So that's looking at all the access control priorities, asset management and so on, which of course part of that will be then mapping out in the case of IoT where all those endpoints, IoT endpoints are, so that it's clear to have visibility into those and understand the status of the health of that network.
Thanks, Joel. What makes IoT security so complex? Is it really complex, Paul?
Yes, is probably the short answer. We see from talking to our customers lots of gaps in terms of the security technology that they've deployed for the integration of their IoT networks. When we look at the organizations now, for many of them, the devices that they have deployed, as Peter and Joel mentioned, they have vulnerabilities already either, built in at source or, have been appearing over the life of the device. As Joel mentioned, things like outdated software. We see weak credentials, as Joel mentioned, and, in some cases there can be little or no encryption depending on how the devices are deployed. And, when you look at the research around IoT devices, and particularly the security breaches and the posture that organizations have deployed today, traditional corporate mobile devices tend to have a better security capability than your IoT devices. IoT devices are deployed for much longer periods than traditional IoT devices. There's a real difficulty in extending IT security systems to those devices because they don't operate in the same way as a traditional IT device in the way it integrates into the network and security systems that companies have already deployed. Typical IT security systems will require clients or agents to be installed on the device or certificates to be generated and deployed, which isn't always possible for IoT devices. And especially those that have been, deployed for some time, which is, is very typical for IoT devices. You look just last week, MediaTek, which is a very large Taiwanese chip manufacturer. Their chips are deployed in some of the world's leading brands of smartphone and IoT devices, and they reported some critical vulnerabilities in their chips and the SDKs that they had deployed. And, they were so severe that they were flagged as having a CVSS, which is the standard scoring system used internationally, of 9.8 out of 10. 7 of those vulnerabilities were affecting vendors such as Ubiquiti and Netgear, which are, well deployed within the industry. And while, they have issued security updates for those devices, it isn't always possible to deploy those updates to IoT devices. And when we look at most of the devices now and the customers that we're dealing with, a lot of the devices that are deployed are using open source software and tooling, which, has been already identified as an issue for other companies like Realtek, where they had a vulnerability a couple of years ago, which affected some 150 different models of device deployed in the market. So one of the biggest issues with IoT devices is they're typically running low memory or low processing power, and for an awful lot of them, they don't support the over-the-air patching or updates that you would get with your traditional IT devices. For some organizations, the only solution is to go to site to update those devices, which is, generally the exact opposite as to why these devices were deployed. So, yeah, we see this as a significant issue for the companies that we're dealing with. Joel, would you agree? What do you see in terms of complexity?
Yeah, I would agree 100% with all of the points that you made. I think any technology change comes with pain typically. So, businesses are transforming all aspects of their IT, and connected things is an important part of that. There's rapid movement to cloud, there's a take-up of AI, and there's all kinds of great productivity gains. But like many technology solutions, you solve one problem and create 3 new ones. Multiple security vendors in the mix, multiple platforms, alert fatigue, which feeds into your volume of events points that you made. So all of those make IT security quite complicated to do by security teams.
And so, staying with Joel, from your perspective at IDC, what makes NIS2 compliance for IoT difficult to achieve? If IoT security is complex, is IoT seen as being strategic in most cases, and therefore, how do organizations respond to the NIS2 compliance requirements?
Well, I think for NIS2 compliance, the challenges relate very much to the previous section where we spoke about, the complexity of IoT security. So all of those points that we made, including legacy. But there's an additional challenge that's more around a soft skills one or organizational one. It's getting IT infrastructure, network infrastructure and connectivity, cloud professionals all on the same page for an integrated, IoT system deployment or a project. IT/OT convergence might be a part of that for management of systems. So it's important to have everybody on the same page with regards to security discipline and best practice. And a really important thing is making sure that stakeholders aren't just making decisions in a vacuum without actually consulting with the security team. So, we're doing this and we're putting all these IoT endpoints there, and then afterwards they go and speak to the security team. So yeah, it has to be a conversation that happens at the earliest stages possible, really. And then, the second major issue with legacy systems, unpatched firmware, unsecured endpoints, and internet-facing devices that, by that very nature, can be very vulnerable, especially for that, unencrypted data interception. Having said all that, painted a pretty nightmarish picture there. IoT is and should be very strategic, and the NIS2 compliance and frameworks are a good thing because when done well, they can actually propel a business forward with its strategy and achieving business objectives. That could be making the company itself more competitive in the landscape that it competes in, or operational benefits, production benefits. NIS2 security and IoT certainly should be wrapped up and interwoven with an overall business strategy.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So how can we, Peter, together help customers or organizations address these challenges? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, it's for sure we need to make things simple for the end customer, because no one likes to do some work to secure their IoT devices. They're very often inaccessible once they're deployed in the field. And no one is really keen on adding another software agent on a device that is already running stable in the field. Neither do they want to install extra servers on their LAN on their private network on the LAN side, because it's all very costly and time consuming. So now, together with Aeris, I think we have a good point, offering a solution that means zero effort for the customer, having an integrated IoT cybersecurity solution on top of what is already there as an IoT solution.
And Joel, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd agree with those points that Peter made, but in addition to that, I think it's always advisable and preferable just to go back to security basics and good discipline. So security teams, hand in hand with stakeholders in the organization, just need to define those frameworks, but then adhere to them. It might sound like an obvious step to do, but these are super important to execute on those solid security disciplines. And then the other factor, that's quite a traditional, step-by-step process. The other factor is innovation. Businesses should be looking to automate, and then automate some more as much as possible. With smart tools and innovative products from vendors and solutions from vendors, you can raise the efficiencies of security operations, for example, and the SecOps management of the IoT estate, gain access to greater visibility and monitoring so you can address vulnerabilities as they come. Reactive security is no longer fit for task in the current environment that we live in, with cyber criminal activities being so aggressive and effective with their attacks. And so a proactive security approach is essential. So once again, shop around for innovation and seek to automate and centrally orchestrate as much as possible.
Yeah. So there are ways to move forward, and certainly partners like Orange Belgium can help address some of those challenges by offering enterprise customers those solutions. We'll come back to that in a minute. And obviously organizations can help themselves by going back to basics, as you said, Joel. So what are the risks then for organizations to delay, not to act? Paul?
I think if organizations delay action, particularly on IoT security, they face significant risks that, from what we've seen, are getting bigger and bigger. In terms of, the cyber attacks themselves, they're becoming more sophisticated, and in our view, the longer companies wait to deal with those, the greater the exposure to these threats, and particularly the operational impact can be severe for companies. A single compromised device, can disrupt, manufacturing facilities, critical infrastructure systems, and so potentially leads to costly downtime, and worse still is the safety risk. If you look at the American Water Company breach that happened last October, 6 months on, and the company's website is still offline, and a number of their customer care and billing systems are still undergoing testing to ensure they're fully protected and ready to go back online. And depending on where you look at reporting in terms of outages and recovery from them, industry estimates expect most downtime to be anything up to 4 weeks from a cyber attack. And it can take up to 9 months, for a full recovery. So, the costs, to organizations can be immense. And, depending on, again, where you read, your statistics from, whether it's IBM or Verizon, they do some annualized reports there. They report that any breach nowadays is costing up to 5 million, depending on the size of the organization. So, exposed systems in our experience are, a sleeping giant. And, for the attackers, they can spend months, even years, seeking out vulnerabilities to exploit, whether that's, as Joel mentioned, default usernames and passwords, vulnerabilities in the firmware because of difficulty patching them, configuration errors. In the case of the company that has deployed the system, they need to play, in our experience, a perfect game in terms of the service they deploy, whereas the attacker just needs to find the right gap or vulnerability once. And so, the reality in delaying action isn't just a technical risk, it's also a business risk that affects the whole organization.
Yeah, I can only confirm. It's exactly that. The longer you wait to protect yourself against the cyber attacks, well, the more exposed you will be. And I fully agree. First step would at least be aware, being aware that you're in a safe mode. By basically monitoring if there's any of your devices connecting to malicious or suspicious destinations.
And from my side, I would add, additional to the revenue loss that you mentioned, Paul, there's additional financial impacts to consider, such as EU fines. So, if you are falling foul of compliance and regulations, there can be fines for that. On top of that, you can have a loss of reputation. As we know, it takes quite a long time to build trust, but that trust can disappear overnight in case of a security breach that's mishandled or not communicated well enough, including steps taken to mitigate. And then measuring the breach, the cost of breach can be a piece of elastic, really. You might have to bring an incident response provider if you don't have the capabilities in-house to do that. Hopefully, you'll be performing some root cause analysis and forensics to understand the cause of breach. We hear nightmare stories about breaches that take place. A ransomware is paid, and then 2 or 3 weeks later, the same attack and same attackers just do it again. So root cause analysis and clean systems restore is super important. And then, of course, there's impact on production or just downtime. So, yeah, the cost of breach is significant, and so cyber crisis readiness is super important.
Yeah. So there's certainly an impact in terms of delaying and not acting, which I think is getting through to many organizations. The world we operate in is, the cellular IoT space, which is transforming significantly when you consider, the move towards 5G, bringing new use cases in for IoT connected devices, and then also eSIM, which allows localization onto networks that would create a potential opportunity for the user to get better connectivity, and obviously the world in which, Peter, you're living in terms of providing solutions and services to enterprise customers is changing such a lot. So how do you think you can help organizations unlock new revenue opportunities and be a trusted supplier to them?
Yeah, indeed. We see technology is getting more and more complex. At the same time, people are just finding 4G, 5G connectivity anywhere in the world as a commodity. It's just obvious that it works, although it isn't. Also, we're adding eSIM, voice over LTE, 5G use cases. It's just getting more and more complex. And on top of that, IoT being more and more important for the businesses, they expect an even higher service availability, reliability, In case of incidents, the service has to be restored in minutes, ideally. And now, on top of that, of course, we need to provide this assurance to the end customers that we can secure the transport of their data, and even show them that their data is being transported to the right destination. It's not being compromised. So integrating that protection is really key to providing an end-to-end secure IoT solution.
Yeah, I mean, that's it's really interesting, because offering that capability from the connectivity perspective and adding that security solution and that visibility is a real opportunity it's the right place to deliver that kind of solution set. So when we look at our relationship between Aeris and Orange Belgium, and the ability for us to provide this solution called Watchtower, it really is a great fit for us to be able to offer this as an end-to-end solution. And in many ways, we believe is the best way to address this solution from a network perspective. And so, Paul, how do you see that developing in terms of our ability to help organizations address this challenge?
I would say we're in a strong position collectively. Aeris identified what we would see as a major gap in the IoT market, the need for security solutions that are specifically built for IoT devices and the networks they're connected to, not just retrofitting from existing IT security tools. And what makes us unique is our vantage point in terms of the service and the network that we're delivering. We're directly in line with the communications at the cellular network level, which means we can address threats as they evolve and appear without relying on things like special SIM cards or software to be installed on devices, or complex rerouting of traffic through network proxies that are on the internet. So all of this kind of secure by design, building it into the core network, ensures that some critical elements of IoT networks like latency and network changes are not a consideration in terms of the networks that are already deployed. And, when you look at our long-standing partnership with OBE, this has been key to making this happen in terms of what we can deliver to the customers that we jointly have. We've combined OBE's market expertise with our security know-how to efficiently deliver cybersecurity for IoT directly within the networks that we host, manage and support. And that's, as you mentioned, using the Watchtower solution. It's a software as a service, automated cybersecurity solution that can be turned on for any of our customers without retrofitting anything to the existing network. So it's a streamlined approach, I would say, that works seamlessly with what businesses already have in place without any additional complexity required.
Yeah, we've been using the Aeris IoT platform for a very long time now to build our tailor-made enterprise solutions in IoT. For us, adding Watchtower is just a logical step. It's part of the security product portfolio from Orange Belgium. And we already have it running for a couple of months now. And it's amazing to see how many of the malicious and suspicious events it detects on our installed customer base. So as we speak, our sales and pre-sales people are being trained by Aeris to acquire the necessary skills to not only show and demonstrate the added value, but also show the easiness of use, that it's a really zero-touch onboarding on this new Watchtower product. And it's our philosophy. We have to keep things simple for the end user. They're not all IoT experts. They're not all IoT security experts either. And I do strongly believe that cybersecurity shall also be packaged in our connectivity offer by default.
Very good. So thank you, everybody. I think we've covered a lot of ground. We've covered really what's going on in terms of NIS2, bringing the why act now kind of question to the fore, discussed the complexity around securing IoT devices and networks, and then come to a potential solution around how to develop that conversation, with a partner like Orange Belgium as an opportunity to engage further. So I hope this has been useful for everybody. So finally, to wrap up, what are your last key takeaways from this session, Paul?
I suppose my takeaway would be that businesses need to rethink their approach to IoT security. There will be as many cellular connected IoT devices worldwide as there will be people in the next 10 years. And so enterprises need to adopt solutions that can deliver a zero trust architecture and better network segmentation of their IoT devices. They need to ensure that they're not treating IoT security as an afterthought. It has to be baked into the design and the lifecycle management of these devices, whether they're 10 years old or whether they're brand new.
And Joel, what's your last word?
Well, I would encourage businesses to look at NIS2 as a team sport with organizational wide buy-in. So that's identifying key stakeholders, whether that's from the risk department or within the security team or other. A risk-based approach that would certainly help alignment with compliance. And then finally, as I said earlier in this webinar, to reiterate, automate, automate, and automate.
And Peter?
So I think things are clear. Huh? Don't sit back and wait. Act now and get in touch with Orange Belgium, and we'll be happy to explain you how we can help you in detail.
Thank you very much. Great way to finish. I'd like to thank you all on the panel for presenting so clearly and eloquently. Thank you very much for being a part of this. And thanks to everybody who has joined to listen and will listen on the replays. We look forward to discussing this in more detail with all of you in the future. Thank you once again to everybody, and goodbye.